This is Chemistry for Monday, September 14th. Today we're going to be talking about unit conversions. So what do I mean by that? Well, we're talking about going from one measurement in a certain unit to another measurement in a different unit. In other words, 1 foot, there's a measurement with a unit, and we want to figure out how many inches that is. Well, hopefully you guys will all know, that's 12 inches. So that's our unit. We've converted our unit from feet to inches. That's all we're talking about here today. Might sound complicated, but I think you're going to see it's pretty easy. A little note here before I go on. Once we start back in school next week, when you are in class with me here in the building, I want you to bring a calculator. You're going to need that calculator while you're in class, right? At home, that's fine. If you want to use your phone, I really don't care. But in class, I want you to be able to show me that you can use the calculator to come up with the number that you're looking for. All right? All right, so here, let's go on to taking our conversion a little bit more complicated. Right? So if I tell you I've measured my cat, Sasha, and I measured her to be 24 inches, how long is she in feet? So I want you to convert our unit, inches, into feet. We're going to convert inches into feet. Well, how do we do that? Well, most of you probably have already done it in your head because it's something you're used to doing. 24 inches, that's 2 feet. How did you do that? What did you have to do? What did you have to know in your head to do that? Well, you had to know what the ratio was, how many inches are in a foot. Right? You had to know what that conversion was. And then you had to know how to put that conversion in to your head to do your math. Right? I'm going to show you the instructions on how to do that today. It won't be too bad. All right, so we all know that she would be 2 feet. So how are we going to do this? What are our rules? Well, a couple things to think about as we get going is the first thing I want you to think about, we're always going to set things up so that our units will cancel, Right? So we're going to see a unit in the top, someplace I want to see a unit in the bottom. That'll help you keep your bookkeeping straight and make sure you come up with the right answer. All right. The next thing I want you to think about is being neat. This is not so much for me as it is for you. I want you to be able to follow your thinking, follow your work, to make sure that you've done everything correctly. For example, that you've followed through and you can cancel your units. You can see what you're doing, okay? So what are our steps? The first thing I want to do is we're going to talk about how do you write a conversion, 1 foot, 12 inches. How do we write that as a fraction with a unit? Right? We're going to always write that as a fraction as a unit. So in other words, we're going to put 1 foot on the top. In our numerator, we'll put our division line and we'll put 12 inches on the bottom. Now, sometimes we might do it the other way around. It depends. And how do you know which way to do it? Here you go. I want you to set up that conversion fraction so the units on the top are going to cancel the units on the bottom. The units on the top are going to cancel the units on the bottom. So one term's going to have, let's say, feet in the top. Our conversion then would have feet in the bottom. We want them to cancel out. And we're going to keep adding these conversion terms until we get to our last fraction. And our last conversion, we're going to have the unit we're looking for will be in the top. And then when we've canceled all the other units out to that point, that top unit will be the last one that's left. And that's how you know you're done with identifying all your terms. All right. And finally, after you've done that, you've got all your setup right, I want you to take these next 2 steps. And this is to make sure you use your calculator correctly. Through the years, what I've seen more often than not is a student just tries to type in these terms one by one, and you do something wrong, and you end up with the right answer. Even though you've done all your setup work right, you haven't entered it into your calculator right. And these last 2 steps are to help you do that. What I want you to do first is I want you to take all the numbers in the top, all your numerators, and you're going to multiply them together. All right, and then write down that product. Then I want you to take all the numbers in the bottom and multiply them all together. And I want you to put that in the bottom of the fraction at the end. And then the last step, I want you to divide those 2 numbers. Divide that top number by the bottom number. All right. If you do it this way, you do that division only once, you're going to get the right answer. You start trying to do divisions in the middle of it, it's real easy to make a mistake. So I don't want you to do that. Okay. So let's do a couple simple ones. These only have 1 step. So it's going to have our beginning unit, we'll have 1 conversion, and that's all we're going to need to do. How about 60 quarters? is how many dollars? Well, some of you might be able to do this in your head right away, right? Because we know that there are 4 quarters in a dollar. 60 divided by 4 gives you 15, right? We have $15. How would you write that down? I want you to focus on doing the simple ones first, because that'll get you used to the idea, and then we can get a little bit more complicated. And by that, all I mean is adding more terms. Okay, so let's start out. We're going to write down the number we're given, the number in units we're given, 60 quarters. And I want you to put that on top of a fraction. We're just going to put a 1 beneath it. The reason I want you to do this just keeps things simple, and it makes it consistent as you go through your calculation. And hopefully, you know, from your algebra class, anytime you put something over 1, you've got the same number back. So we haven't changed anything. We're just making our bookkeeping a little bit easier. Well, now we need to put in our conversion term, our unit conversion term. We know we're going from quarters to dollars. We know there are 4 quarters in a dollar. Well, how do we know how to write this next fraction, our unit conversion term? We want the quarters to cancel. We have quarters in our first term on the top, so it better be in the bottom of our next term. It better be in the bottom of our next term, right? And how do we double check that we're doing that? Because we have a quarter in the top, we have a quarter in the bottom. Those guys are canceling each other. I want you to set them up so you can see them canceling each other. Now, in this case, now the only unit that's left is a dollar. That's what we're looking for. So we've set up our calculation. Now we're going to multiply the top numbers and the bottom numbers. We're going to have $60 in the top. We're just going to have a 1 in the bottom. There's no units left. It's been canceled out. And now we'll do our division. In this case, it's really simple, right? 60 divided by 1, 60 divided by 4. I have a little typo there, is going to be 15. So sorry, guys, I got to correct that typo here. This 1 really should be a 4. 60 divided by 4 gives you $15. Okay. So let's do another one. How about eggs? We're going to take eggs and we're going to calculate how many dozen we have. So again, we're going to start writing. We start by writing down what we're given, 45 eggs. We're going to make it to the top of a fraction. We're going to put a 1 underneath of it. Always are going to start with that step. What's our next step? How many eggs are there in a dozen? Well, there's 12 eggs in a dozen. Okay. So which way do we write that ratio? Which way do we write that unit conversion? The 12 eggs and the 1 dozen. Which goes on the bottom? Well, again, we've got eggs in the top here, 45 eggs in the top. So our unit conversion better have the egg part in the bottom. Right? 1 dozen, 12 eggs. Again, we knew to write it that way because we had eggs in the top of the first term. We better have our second term with eggs in the bottom. They cancel each other out. And then what are we left with? A dozen. That's what we're looking for. So let's multiply those numbers together. Whoop. Looks like I lost a term there. Out of order. 45 dozen, right? 45 eggs times 1 dozen, but our eggs have canceled. So we're just left with 45 dozen. We got 12 in the bottom. Now we're going to go into our calculator. We're going to take 45 and divide it by 12. And we end up with 3.75. And our units are dozen. Okay. Let's make it a little more complicated by making our conversion more than 1 step. Okay. Let's do a multiple step conversion. Let's start out with one that has 2 conversions in it. So we have seconds and we want to go to hours. Again, our first step, we're going to take that 234 seconds. We're going to put it on the top and we're going to put a 1 in the bottom. Right? Anything divided by 1 is itself. Now we need to do our first conversion. Well, some of you might know how many seconds are in an hour. I don't happen to know that off the top of my head, but I do know how many seconds are in a minute. And if we can go from seconds to minutes, we can then go from minutes to hours. All right. So we know that there's 60 seconds in 1 minute. How are we going to put that conversion term in? Right. We have seconds in the top of our first term here, so we better have seconds in the bottom of our next term. And we're going to write it as 1 minute on top of 60 seconds. Again, we haven't changed anything. All we've done is change our units. We haven't changed the value of what we're looking at. Right? 1 minute and 60 seconds are the same thing. So we know we've written it this way so we can cancel our seconds in the top of our first term with the seconds in the bottom of our second term. Now, we're still not quite where we want to go. We want to go to hours. So we need to convert our minutes to hours. So we need another conversion. Again, we look at it. What unit are we left with? We have minutes in the top. So our next conversion factor, the minutes better be in the bottom. So they cancel. Okay. 1 minute if that 1 minute is in the top of our second term, we better put that minutes in the bottom of our third term. Again, we did that so our minutes cancel. Okay. What are we left with? Hours. That's what we're looking for. That's the unit we're looking for. So we know we've got our setup done. Let's do our multiplications. If we multiply the top, we're going to get 234. All the units have canceled except for hours, so let's put that up in the top. If we multiply the bottom, we're going to get 3,600. Sorry, I left a zero there. And when we do that division, and right, there's no units on that, it's just 3,600. We do that division, we're going to get 0.065 hours. All right. Let's do one more. This one's going to be a little bit longer, a couple more steps, but we're going from weeks to seconds. Weeks from seconds. Now we know seconds are smaller than weeks. So as we go through our conversion process, we want to go to the next smaller unit. We're going to take a week. We're going to go to the next smaller unit. We're going to go to the next smaller unit. We're going to go to the next smaller unit until we end up with our units being in seconds. So let's start it out. We got 1 week in the top. We're going to put that over a 1. Remember, we're always going to take what we're given and divide it by 1. Now, our first conversion is going to be week to something smaller than a week. Well, what do we know that's smaller than a week? Days. How many days in a week? 7 days in a week. So we got that unit conversion. 7 days is equal to 1 week. How are we going to put it into our calculation? Well, we have week in the top of our first term. So our next term, we're going to put week in the bottom. All right. Again, we're doing that so that our weeks cancel each other here. Well, we're at days. We're still not quite where we want to get to for seconds. So we got to do another conversion, right? What's the next unit smaller than a day? Hours. How many hours in a day? 24. So now we got to put that ratio in here. How do we put 1 day and 24 hours in? Well, we have days in the top of our term here. So we better put days in the bottom of our conversion. Again, we're doing that so that the day in the top cancels with the day in the bottom. But with hours, we still aren't where we want to go to seconds, but we're close, right? Because now we know how to take hours to seconds. So we're going to put in our conversion from hours to seconds. 60 seconds. I'm sorry, hours to minutes. 60 minutes in an hour. Again, we have hours in the top of our last term, so our conversion better have its hours in the bottom. So we're going to put in 60 minutes over an hour. Again, we're doing that so our hours cancel. And now we have the last step, right? Minutes to seconds, easy one. We know 60 seconds in a minute. Then we have minutes in the top of our last term here, so we better put it in the bottom when we write down our conversion. Our minutes cancel. Our only unit left is seconds. That's what we're looking for. So let's do all of our multiplications across the top, right? And we'll end up with 604,800. What's the units left? There's only seconds left in the top. If we look at the bottom, all of our numbers are 1. All of our units are canceled out. So we're just left with 1 in the bottom here. And then we just write in our final answer. We don't like leaving just a 1 in the bottom of our final answer. And we're just going to write that as 604,800 seconds. Okay. Hopefully that makes enough sense, guys. If this doesn't, please go back and look at it and then check out the next video on the unit conversion worksheet for the day. Thanks a lot.